Hello everyone, my name is Alex Ayers and today I will be presenting on the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1972, which soon thereafter became known as the Clean Water Act. I'll begin with the legislative history of this bill. So in the early 1940s, decades upon decades of pollution had reached a critical point. The Surgeon General of the United States was warning that more than half of American citizens were relying on deeply contaminated sources of drinking water. The Department of the Interior had warned that the economy and personal health were both being severely negatively impacted by water pollution. So that led to a demand for legislation, which led to the creation and the eventual passage of the Federal Water Pollution Act of 1948, which has since been amended 23 times, with some of the most significant amendments coming in 1961 with the focus on storage for stream flow regulation, 1966 with a focus on prohibiting oil discharge, 1970 with the creation of the EPA, 1972 with a focus on non-point source regulation, pollution permitting, and a transition to being known as the Clean Water Act, 1977 with a focus on best management practices and implementation, and 1987 with the addition of fines, funding, authorizations, and the addition of Section 319, which dealt specifically with non-point source pollution. This particular set of amendments in 1972 to the Federal Water Pollution Act, which soon thereafter became known as the Clean Water Act, was drafted in response to public demand and public frustration that public bodies of water were simply not safe to interact with. So Congress set out to create this bill with the objective of restoring and maintaining the natural, chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. This particular set of amendments reorganized and expanded on the original legislation while adding new legislation such as the requirement to attain federal permits in order to release pollutants, as well as additional legislation such as pollution reduction goals, protection for aquatic wildlife, and requirements for federal funding and program development. The Clean Water Act has a great deal of importance to many natural resource professionals. Number one, because over its lifespan, the Clean Water Act has created the job titles of many natural resource professionals, whether that be from creating agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency or implementing reporting requirements for agencies such as the Department of the Interior. The Clean Water Act has created a lot of jobs and job titles that wouldn't exist without this legislation. And secondly, it creates responsibilities for federal facilities to reduce water pollution. So anyone working at those federal facilities may have to deal with some of these responsibilities, such as preventing pollution, obtaining permits, or developing management plans. And finally, the Clean Water Act really reaches into most fields of natural resource management. So if you're working in any of these fields, you will likely come across the Clean Water Act at some point, whether that be working in agriculture due to the way that agricultural chemicals influence water pollution, or whether that be restoration work and putting dirt and sediments into waterways that is seen as pollution. And even in recreation, you have to be careful of trails going too close to water and things like that. So the Clean Water Act is very overarching into all fields of natural resource management. The legislative process of this bill was actually quite interesting. It began in October of 1971 with Democratic Senator Edmund S. Muskie of Maine introducing Bill 2770 to the Senate, where it was referred to the Public Works Subcommittee on Air and Water Pollution, which was headed by Senator Muskie, so it flew through that committee quite quickly, and just a few days later passed the Senate with a vote of 86-0. It was then sent to the House Public Works Subcommittee on Flood Control and Internal Development, where the debate on the structure of the bill began. But nevertheless, just a few short weeks later, the House bill, H.R. 11896, passed the House with a vote of 380 to 14, but the House bill and the Senate bill were so vastly different that a special conference between the House and the Senate had to begin on May 11th of 1972, where they discussed their disagreements, and the disagreements are actually not between the political parties, they were primarily between the House and the Senate, with the House pushing for a program built on the same platform as the federal aid highway program, where the federal government collected revenue and set all the standards, but then let the states handle all the implementation, whereas the Senate wanted complete control over design and implementation of this process. And similarly, the Senate's version of the legislation set specific deadlines for implementation, whereas the House was a lot more lax and offered a lot more flexibility. So it took them a total of 40 meetings over 10 months to eventually come to a compromise between the two houses. A compromise was finally reached, however, on September 14th, 1972, and shortly thereafter, on October 4th, the House and the Senate both passed the revised legislation with a vote of 366 to 11 in the House and 74 to 0 in the Senate. The next day, the final bill was sent to President Nixon for his signature. He did not choose to sign that bill, however. He waited until October 17th, and just mere hours before the bill would have automatically become law based on his inaction, Nixon vetoed the bill and cited its $24 billion price tag as just too high of a cost. The next day, the House and the Senate defiantly voted to override that veto with a vote of 247 to 23 in the House and 52 to 12 in the Senate. So on October 18th, 1972, the Clean Water Act was finally passed by the 92nd Congress, taking just under a year's time and being overseen by 2 sessions of Congress. All told, there were a total of 6 amendments included in this bill, some of the most notable of which I've highlighted here, including the addition of pollution reduction goals, the addition of protections for aquatic wildlife species, and the addition of requirements for each individual state to have management and planning strategies. There will be a presentation by another student focusing on law reviews and court cases regarding the Clean Water Act, but I've included a few resources here in case you want some additional reading. My references for this project are listed here. Thank you so much and have a great day.